Halo Wars 2 is an unexpected game. It's a sequel to an 8-year-old console RTS, a genre that many believed was impossible to make work on consoles, or at least impossible to make it not suck. And while the original certainly proved some naysayers wrong, it was a pretty good game. It's still taken nearly a decade to get a sequel, and that sequel is launching potentially in an even more unsure environment, where risks are sparsely taken and the Halo franchise itself isn't the powerhouse it was back then. Halo Wars 2 can't rely on the brand as much, yet here it is. And I commend the decision to go through with a project like this, but is the game actually good? Is it worth that risk, and is it worth a purchase from you, the consumer? Well, there's no better place to start than with its story, and immediately I was compelled by the setup. The game focuses on the crew of the Spirit of Fire, which has been frozen in cryosleep, taking a nap and drifting for decades. It was an interesting idea to not only continue the story of the characters we had in the first game, but to wake them up during a time where other Halo stories are currently taking place. There's a lot of potential for interesting storytelling when this crew that went missing during a time of great conflict resurfaces, not knowing whether they even won or lost. And similarly, the Banished I also found to be an instantly compelling antagonist. The story of Atriox and his rise to power is bad this legendary warrior who defied the Covenant after years of his clan being deployed as frontline fodder, and though every other was killed, he returned every time until eventually he turned on them. And because of his prestige and his legend, he compelled those around him to join, and over time he created this army. In my opinion, this is the most interesting story, at least conceptually, that Halo has had in years. 343 has been in charge of Halo for a while now, and personally the stories they've told have just not been interesting to me. Not because they were always told poorly, though I think with Halo 5 that was certainly the case. I was just never captivated by their direction. But this grabbed me. The Banished are interesting. I want to know more about them. I want to explore the dynamics of the faction and learn about Atriox as a character. Same with the Spirit of Fire. How would they react to events that happened while they were gone? How would the world react to them being found? This is a great foundation to tell an interesting story, and I think the idea to make self-contained stories separate from the main arc is potentially something Halo can do more of in the future. But unfortunately, it doesn't develop past that initial premise. It sets up Atriox and the Banished perfectly, but he never develops in any meaningful way past that introduction. In fact, we barely see him or hear him at all, and with the Banished, we don't really know what their overarching motivations are, how they're led, and the dynamics of the faction other than a few little hints here and there. And while that's fine, I'm not saying reveal all the secrets. I think a degree of mystery is important to have. I would have liked to have seen them explored more. And that's kind of the Halo Wars 2 story in a nutshell. Sets up a great story, but doesn't develop it past that initial setup or capitalize on the opportunities it presented. It's not bad, and the good news here is that there are a lot of pieces to build on, but they weren't quite put together here. That doesn't mean the campaign's not worth playing. It's still a fun ride from start to finish, and there are plenty of highlights. The blur cutscenes are absolutely gorgeous. Just watching will make you salivate for a Halo movie, and hell, it doesn't even have to be live action. These cutscenes already look good enough. The story, while it could have been better, is entertaining enough to want to see through, and it contains a lot of cool moments, both big and small, that will surely be appreciated by fans of the series. The gameplay itself features a lot of variety, with each mission offering unique encounters and objectives. These scenarios I can see myself playing multiple times, and on top of that, the game has a plethora of optional objectives and collectible skulls to add extra layers of challenge. Despite the amount of action going on screen, I rarely ever notice performance issues, and just the overall look of the game is a big step up from Halo's current art style. The UNSC looks great and is reminiscent of that classic art style you know and love, and while the Banished are a new faction, they're also badass. The new faction aesthetically presents itself as if you took a bunch of Covenant equipment and ran it through a chop shop. It's fittingly brutish. The only aspect of the art style I'm not fond of is the Forerunner stuff. It's like 343's current Forerunner look, and I'm just not a big fan of it. It's just passable. Overall, it's a very enjoyable experience despite its flaws, but it's not the strength of the game. Really, the strength of the game is the gameplay itself. Compared to some other RTSs, it's pretty simple, but that's not a bad thing. In fact, I think it's almost necessary for the game to function intuitively on console. Things like resource management, base building, unit functionality, they're all streamlined. You build bases on preset areas and collect resources by constructing buildings. The more generators and supply depots you have, the faster you generate resources. You use these, of course, to deploy various types of units. These troops are very easy to understand. There's three kinds: infantry, vehicle, and air vehicles. Each individual unit has its own strengths and weaknesses. Snipers are really strong against infantry, but weak against almost everything else. The Cyclops is a great anti-vehicle unit, but it can't attack air vehicles at all. Then you have units like the Marines that are versatile and somewhat effective against everything. Some units are strictly support, and some units have special abilities like the Warthog, which can ram enemies to do a lot of damage. So here we have multiple concepts, all fairly easy to understand, and this makes the game accessible. But that does not mean it lacks depth, because I found that when you take all these mechanics and layer them on top of each other, it creates compelling gameplay opportunities. It's a constant back and forth between building up your resource generation, but also building up your army as well. If you spend too much time on your resources, you may get rushed and have nothing to defend yourself. You build up too quickly and you'll run out and stall production. Maybe you send scouts out to see what your opponent's doing. If you see him making a lot of air vehicles, maybe you switch things up and make some Wolverines to defend yourself. The nature of the mechanics makes building your army fun, and it requires a fair amount of micromanaging, making sure you have a good balance of troops to deal with a multitude of threats. Many fights come down to who can react to the opponent faster and send in the proper reinforcements, but players also have a selection of hero powers at their disposal. These abilities can completely change the tide of battle and can be as simple as a health recovery aura or as impactful as a giant missile strike. One of my favorites was the ODST drop, where you send in the iconic Halo Helljumpers as they come barreling out of the sky for some quick and powerful reinforcements. There are multiple leaders to choose from, each with their own units, powers, and style, and I found the majority of them enjoyable to play. The amount of strategies only increase when you have some friends join you. Halo Wars 2 features up to 3v3 battles, and it's a hell of a lot of fun to coordinate with your team. When I played with my buddy, he'd build fast to try and keep the enemy off me, but I'd build slow and go resource heavy to try and upgrade as fast as I could to bring in some more powerful units, all the while communicating enemy positions and compositions. Without a doubt, the gameplay is the highlight of the game, and it's made possible by the impressively intuitive controls. For a genre that's not supposed to work well on consoles, Halo Wars 2 feels damn good. It's easy to select units, navigate the map, and interact with the UI. Just playing through the campaign will give you a good feel of the controls, and from there you're golden. I had no issues reacting in a timely fashion, and the controls are absolutely praiseworthy. Now, I'd be dishonest if I said I didn't encounter some issues. I did. I played a number of skirmish matches, and I found that the enemy AI would make some completely brain-dead decisions, like I'd just be about to lose and have my base destroyed, and then all of a sudden the AI would take their big-ass army and just leave, as if to tell me that I'm not worth it. Sometimes after the game had gone on for a while, the AI would just dirt, and after having had multiple clashes, I'd build an army and march them to the base to find the AI had just kind of been chilling with their thumb up their ass, didn't even build nothing. Obviously, human opponents aren't this stupid. I mean, at least I'd hope so. Holy shit, that'd be kind of sad. Now, in campaign, this isn't as big of an issue because scenarios are more planned out and scripted, but I encountered some different issues there as well. There were a few noticeable glitches. At one point, I found myself being shot with missiles seemingly coming from an invisible entity. I was confused. I investigated. Turns out a blisterback had gotten banished into the Shadow Realm and was firing shit at me from the void, also known as underneath the map. My ODSTs tried to shoot it, but to no avail, and it wiped out a good portion of my troops. Another instance, I was supposed to protect an objective for 30 minutes. I lost the objective 15 minutes in, and it should have been a game over. But instead, it got locked up. I lost control of my left thumbstick and could only circle the camera. Despite a huge banished swarm congregating around, they couldn't attack it, and eventually the timer hit 0 and it counted as a victory, and I moved on to the next level, and it felt so good, let me tell you. I also at one point got locked in an infinite loading screen that lasted for 10 minutes before I finally just restarted the game. These are pretty serious bugs, and while I would by no means consider the game broken, and no doubt these will be fixed in a timely manner, hopefully, I still felt compelled to mention them here. Important to note that at this time, very few people are online and playing the game, so I don't have a good indication of how servers will function under stressful conditions, but when you do choose to go up against other players, the options are pretty limited, and there's no competitive ranking system at launch. This is hugely disappointing, especially for a game so heavily relying on strategy. Instead, we get a generic XP-based ranking system built around, you guessed it, randomly generated loot packs, the bane of my fucking existence, all wrapped up in a convenient little package called Blitz. I find it hilarious that they featured a quote from IGN in their trailer for Blitz saying, "the mode that nobody saw coming." I mean, that's gotta be a joke. A Microsoft game featuring a mode that revolves around RNG card backs? Who could have predicted this? And I'll be frank, I find this mode pretty deplorable. Structurally, it is undeniably pay to win, and let me explain. Blitz is a mode that mixes the RTS mechanics with a collectible card game. Now, conceptually, I don't even hate the idea. I love CCGs, and if done right and were a whole game built around this idea, you might be able to make something pretty cool. But this is not cool. There's not that many cards in the game, so the issue isn't so much that you'll have more cards than someone else, though that's certainly a possibility. The problem is that these cards can be leveled by unlocking duplicates, which means if I open a Warthog card, I can level up that card by opening even more Warthogs and packs, which means the more packs I open, the better my shit is. Why would you buy card packs? To get more stuff. Why do you need more stuff? So that your stuff can be better than someone else's stuff. We can literally have the exact same cards, but mine will be better just because I've opened more packs than you. And I've actually heard some people try to defend this by saying, it's not pay to win, because you can still win if you're skilled. Please tell me, what do you have to gain by being that ignorant? This game allows you to spend money to receive an objective advantage, and a significant one at that. I had my buddy Ackman help me test this out, and units that are just one level higher are about 20 to 25% more powerful. That's huge. Now, I understand this isn't a perfect experiment. Most units don't always counter each other, but I still find it to be an enlightening illustration. But this is okay. Just because you might still win, it's okay that I have objectively better cards just because I might deploy them wrong. Great, then give me an objectively better gun in a first-person shooter because I might miss. Fair and balanced. Oh, but it's okay, because Blitz is separated from the rest of the game and you can just go play that. Pro tip, never double down on stupid. Maybe I'm sick of nearly 1/3 of every Microsoft game devoting resources to a mode that revolves around microtransactions, and then having that microtransaction RNG card system also represent the primary reward structure of the game. You can't justify Blitz just because you don't have to play it, because it's in the game, and all that time and effort, they even made a beta for it, could have been devoted to something that's better. And no, I don't think the fact that it helps pay for future DLC is a good excuse either, because that has nothing to do with the quality of the experience, and I just don't think that replacing potentially better content with shit designed for the purpose of revenue generation is a good idea just to fund DLC for a game that is now not as good as it could have been. And that goes for not only the Blitz mode itself, but for the progression system as well. Now, that's what we know about Blitz, and here's the thing, I can't talk in great detail about it, because this being a CCG, so to speak, we're not going to know what the meta's like until it's out in the open. I intend to make a follow-up video to Blitz in the near future that goes into more depth, but from what I've played so far, it's not looking good. There's only one map. It's a simple objective. You're just holding 3 points, which appears to be 343's go-to strat when designing a new mode, and quite frankly, I don't think there's enough cards here to create a compelling metagame. There's only about 100 if I counted correctly. A lot are leader-specific, and most are just units from the actual good part of the game, where the strategies you've already learned just apply here again. Then there's special cards, but again, really generic, like instead of the standard vehicle, you get a vehicle that's invisible. To me, I think the novelty of deck creation will wear off very fast, and a metagame will solidify with a couple net decks reigning supreme. There's just not enough variety within the cards to have any significant variety in strategies. Not saying there won't be any, and not saying that every single card is uninteresting, just not a lot. And this is coming from someone who's played card games their whole life and has had a Hearthstone addiction for the past 3 years. And the good parts of Blitz, the strategy parts, well, in my opinion, you can just get a better version of that in the rest of the game. And the few unique strategies the mode presents, and there are a few, just don't justify the mode as a whole. Best case scenario, it's a little mode you can play occasionally if you want a few casual quick bursts of action, or if you want to try the firefight mode, which I would have preferred to not have centered in the Blitz part of the game, but at least it's AI, and you don't have to worry about people with better cards than you. Worst case scenario, it's a quick cash grab and a waste of resources. The way I see it, you have a little over 2/3 of a good game here, and the progression system unfortunately is tied to the 1/3 that's bad. Do I recommend it? Well, you heard the review. Do the good parts that I describe personally sound fun to you? Do the bad parts maybe not bother you as much? Who knows? I can't speak for you. I can only speak for myself and give my opinion. But my opinion is that this is a good game. There is a lot to like here, and I had numerous, I call them all fuck yeah moments, right? When you drop a squad of ODSTs and they just melt shit and you go, oh fuck yeah. Or when you and a buddy build up a giant army and you just death march through, obliterating everything in sight. This game has some steep highs, but some relatively deep lows. I think it's a great game for Halo fans looking to live out some fantasies with these iconic assets, and a great mechanically sound console RTS that's a fun, relatively casual experience for fans of the genre. and also a great entry point for people who are looking to play a new type of game. I think it sets up a really unique story arc that, while not explored deeply here, offers a fun ride and great potential for the future, and aesthetically, this is another sign that Halo's beginning to head in the right direction. Unfortunately, it falls victim to some bad trends in the industry, trends I'd really like to see fall out of favor as soon as possible. Now, I'm not going to give the game a score. It wouldn't be your score, but overall, I found Halo Wars 2 to be a fun, yet flawed game that ultimately has quite a bit to offer. If you liked this review, hated this review, wanted to talk about this review, leave a like, dislike, or comment below, and of course, subscribe for more. Till next time.